You can enable equity pickup for both new and existing applications. When you create a new application, you can enable equity pickup on the Features tab. You must enable intercompany data with tracking first, and then enable ownership management with the equity pickup option selected. To enable equity pickup for an existing application, select Application, then Configuration. Select Enable Features. Intercompany data with tracking must already be enabled to enable ownership management and equity pickup. If you did not enable intercompany data with tracking during application creation, you must recreate the application and enable intercompany data with tracking before you can enable ownership management with equity pickup. With intercompany data with tracking enabled, select Ownership Management and Equity Pickup and click Enable. Sign out and sign back in to use the equity pickup feature. Now let's look at some of the metadata changes to your application when equity pickup is enabled. Enabling equity pickup creates equity pickup income statement and balance sheet accounts. An equity pickup source account, which is a memo account, and an equity pickup data source member. All the legal or level 0 members in the entity dimension must be flagged as intercompany. You'll also need to set up the ownership structure for your entity hierarchies. An equity pickup system calculation rule is added in the local currency tab of the consolidation process screen to ensure that subsidiaries are calculated before their holding companies. The calculation setting for the rule is set to yes when equity pickup is first enabled. If you change the setting to no, the application reverts to non-equity pickup behavior. When equity pickup is enabled, the system creates a single equity pickup system rule set configuration named Default Accounts and Movements. You can modify the default rule set configuration by changing the default members. In addition to modifying the default rule set configuration, you can add additional rule set configurations. When equity pickup is enabled, the system also adds configurable consolidation rule sets for equity pickup. The rules are undeployed by default. For each subsidiary, the rules in the Prepare Source Data rule set apply the holding company ownership percentage to the total equity amount, and write the result to the equity pickup source account for the entity. Equity pickup source is a memo account that does not roll up in the balance sheet. It is used only as a data source for the other equity pickup calculations. For each subsidiary, the equity pickup system rule writes the amount in equity pickup source to the equity company income account of the holding company, using the ICP dimension to record the source entity, and writes a balancing entry to the investment in equity company's equity pickup account. The rules in the reverse holding company data rule set write reversals to the elimination member for the equity company income and investment in equity company's equity pickup accounts, resulting in a contribution of 0 to the parent. This ensures the data is not double counted in the consolidated results. For hierarchies with holding companies at more than one level, the Consolidate EPU source data rule sets calculate the upper-level holding company's equity pickup from the subsidiaries of a lower-level holding company based on its ownership share in the lower-level holding company. You can deploy the Consolidate EPU source data rule set to include equity pickup detail for each subsidiary of the lower-level holding company in the upper-level holding company, or select Consolidate EPU source data indirect grouping to include only a summarized value without detail for each subsidiary. You can only deploy one of these rule sets. In this example, we deployed the Consolidate EPU source data rule set. The values in equity pickup source for legal entity 0012 and its subsidiaries roll up to Consol entity 0012. The upper-level holding company, legal entity 0011, owns 80% of Consol entity 0012. The Consolidate EPU source data rule set makes an adjustment in the elimination member to bring the contribution amount for equity pickup source to 80%. The equity pickup system rule uses the contribution amount in equity pickup source of Consol entity 0012 to populate equity company income and investment in equity company's equity pickup in legal entity 0011, the upper-level holding company. Then the reverse holding company data rule set writes reversals to the elimination members. To learn more, visit docs.oracle.com.